Good afternoon and welcome to Picky Eaters, 6 Strategies to Help Kids Eat Healthy. Today's webinar is presented as part of our Healthy You program to inspire and support you in living your healthy best. Thank you for joining us. My name is Chris Caldwell and I'm a Senior Marketing Specialist here at PeaceHealth. And today I'll be helping our speakers, Jendy Newman and Tok-Hui Yeap, share tips on healthy family nutrition. Here are a few things to expect in today's presentation. A recording of this webinar will be available in a couple of days on peacehealth.org/picky-eaters. And we'll provide that URL again later throughout the presentation. Today's session will be interactive, and through polls, chat, and the question and answer, we welcome your participation. Sound will be muted during the session for everyone but the speakers to enhance the quality of everyone's listening experience. If you have technical difficulties, click the help button. At any time, if you have questions or comments, type them into the box below the chat window. If you're on a smartphone, click the question mark to get to the chat screen. We will do our best to answer questions during the session or during the Q&A near the end. Please limit the scope of your questions to our topic. So our speakers today are Jendy Newman and Tok-Hui Yeap. Jendy is a frequent presenter here in our Healthy You webinar series and is a registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator at PeaceHealth Southwest Specialty Clinic in Vancouver. This is Tok-Hui's maiden presentation here as part of our Healthy You program, and she's wonderful. She is a registered dietitian, and she has the kind of unique specialty of pediatric nutrition, sees patients in the hospital and clinic in Springfield, Oregon. Both have many years of experience providing nutrition counseling, and we're pleased to have them here today to help you train your family for a lifetime of healthy eating. So Jendy, take it away.
Thank you, Chris. Today, Tok-Hui and I will share information to help you and your family understand how we develop taste preference, and then 6 practical steps to help picky eaters expand their food choices and become more adventurous. We will also take time to answer some of your questions and share some great resources and a few recipes. This information will assist families and caregivers to make meal times pleasant times of exploration and connection instead of times of worry, pleading, and short order cooking. While Tok-Hui and I are registered dietitians, it is best to see your own healthcare provider if you have specific concerns. So today we're going to provide information on when and how to seek more support in case of those more problem and very selective eaters as well. Which may include children that may have a medical condition or a sensory processing disorder. We have an extensive resource list and a few handouts that you can download as well. So if you are on the live webinar, on the right side of your screen, you will see 5 red boxes where there are documents that you can click on, and then after the program you can print or save them. They will also be available with the archive version of the program, so if you're listening after the fact, you'll be able to access those resources as well. So I'm a believer in understanding and sharing the why in health concepts, and I feel it better enables us to approach change and find our way there. So I'd like to start by taking a look at how we develop our taste preference. And so I'd like to start that by doing a poll with our currently think about taste preferences. So our first poll, do you think your taste preferences are set by age 1, as a toddler like 18 to 24 months, early childhood 2 to 7 years, later childhood 7 to 12 years, or throughout your lifetime? So give us a guess on what your thoughts are on when your taste preferences are set.
So we'll give everybody a few minutes or moments here to register their vote here on our poll. And the votes are coming in quickly. And it looks like we have approximately 90% of you have weighed in. So we'll go ahead and close this poll out so that we can move forward with the presentation. And it appears that the consensus favorite is that preferences are developed throughout your lifetime, which is good news for me, having a 4-year-old, to think that potentially those taste preferences aren't the ones that drive a lifetime of food choices.
So let's take a look at the answer, and a lot of you have a good thought on that, because we would say that it is throughout your lifetime, that taste preferences and conditionings may start in the womb, but it continues into old age. So how does this work? And let's take a closer look. So taste preference development can begin in the womb via the fetus tasting amniotic fluid, because they begin swallowing at about the 12th week of gestation. And research has shown that by the 32nd week, the fetus actually responds to changes in the taste of the amniotic fluid by changing its drinking behavior. So it's fascinating to see that how a mother eats during her pregnancy can begin to develop a more varied palate for the child. This would continue into if the mother is breastfeeding, her varied diet will provide different flavors in the breast milk. So eating, again, a varied diet, different flavors, some strong, some mild, some savory, maybe some spicy. Those can all make a difference. We also have cultural and familial offerings in infancy, as far as some families might offer some, stronger cultural bitter greens, or maybe even some spicy foods, at a relatively young age, or certain families have favorite foods, and so children tend to like a lot of the same things their family likes. Another way that food taste preference is developed is how families and cultures deal with food neophobia, or fear of new foods. And it's a normal developmental time. And the other thing that can happen is positive or negative experiences with food. For example, if someone has a really strong gagging experience or choking experience with a certain food, then that may create a negative experience. Or we all have those positive experiences, especially around desserts or birthday treats, some of those kinds of things. Let's take a look at how even infants may refuse foods, but if parents keep trying, they can come to like them. So familiarity, instead of breeding contempt, can breed preference. So what this slide is showing is the upper line is infants that were starting purees, and it was a puree that they liked. So they had a good acceptance or good intake of that food consistently because they liked that food. The lower sloped curve is a puree that the parent indicated that they didn't like, but the parent kept trying that over 8 exposure days over a 16-day period. And by the end of that study, they found that the infants that had a vegetable that they didn't like, that by the time they had 8 exposures, their acceptance of that food, the volume, was just about as good as the other food that they already liked. So keeping trying, and often we'll present this concept as taste bud training or being a food explorer, that remember that just trying something once is not enough to help train the taste buds. So parents shouldn't give up, and they should encourage their children that these are just opportunities, and their taste buds may need to have more exposures. And it can take easily 10 to 15 exposures, and sometimes more for more extreme picky eaters. Let's take a little bit closer look at food neophobia, or that fear of new food. So this is a graph that shows how fear of new foods is just, it's a normal part of early childhood between ages, 2 to 6, or sometimes even a little bit younger. So they're, exploring new foods and, exerting their independence. And so how that declines may vary based on the child's temperament or the culture or how the parent or caregiver react, or maybe a child that may have some differences in sensory receptiveness, either they're over or under sensitive to taste, textures, temperatures. The other interesting little thing on this graph is the old age, where that little upturn, where more research may be required, but we can think about things that may affect taste preference at that point. Could be, someone becoming fearful of fat or sodium with heart disease, or maybe medications that affect taste, or maybe gastrointestinal intolerances that develop that then would have a fear of those foods. Some interesting concepts through some food stories with my family. My son really liked broccoli from the get-go, but the power of example, he discovered when he was old enough to recognize that my husband didn't eat the stems of the broccoli. He started leaving those, whereas normally he would eat them before, but when he became more aware and he saw that Dad didn't think it was appropriate to eat the stems, he stopped eating them. And so we as parents realized that we had to be more aware of the example that we set. With my son and green beans, initially he ate those really well, pureed, raw, cooked, but then eventually he kind of stopped eating them and said he just didn't really like them. And then one day I had a bowl of frozen green beans on the counter, and he decided he really liked them in the frozen state. He said to him they tasted sweeter that way. So I began asking him with certain vegetables that he wasn't real fond of, would you like this raw or cooked or still frozen? And that increased his intake of vegetables. For myself, I was a bit of a picky eater, and I was, mushrooms were a gag food to me initially, but it wasn't until I became an early teen and I was more involved in the cooking, and we would get mushrooms kind of on special occasion, and I learned how to cook those mushrooms, and it was my job to prepare this special item that I then became a real lover of mushrooms because I was helping prepare this special food. Pomegranates are an interesting thing for me. I, had liked them initially, and then I had an illness, a nausea and vomiting. I was coming down with a flu or something after I had eaten them, and then I had a food aversion to pomegranates for quite a few years into my 30s. But I gradually started trying them again and was able to get over that food aversion by trying it gradually. So next, we'd like to poll our listening audience to learn how you would respond to your child's refusal of a new food. So would you encourage a tasting or one bite type policy? Would you go ahead and spoon feed it to them? Would you get frustrated and maybe verbally keep encouraging or pushing them to eat it? Or would you give in and provide their requested or preferred food? So families have different strategies that they might employ, and we're curious from our listening audience what strategies your family may currently use.
So the responses are quickly coming in, and we'll wait just a couple moments longer. So we've just about reached the magic 90 percentile milestone, so we'll go ahead and close this poll out for now. And according to our results, we have a lot of very nice parents on the line who encourage a taste or a one bite.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So a lot of you have some really good parenting skills around healthy eating currently. Some families use some of those other methods, and maybe we can explore why we might use some other methods. So and usually it comes down to what's our biggest concern for your picky eater. So this isn't actually a poll, but I'm just going to have you reflect a little bit. So are you concerned that your child might not be getting enough calories or missing nutrients? They may be getting too many calories from low nutrient junk foods, or that they might have long-term picking eating habits that may affect them emotionally and socially, or maybe there's other reasons that you have concerns about them eating a very selective diet. And there's a lot of concerns that parents may have, and so it can be helpful to self-reflect to see how your parenting skills have been influenced from your own early eating environment experiences, to see how it's affecting your child's mealtime interactions currently, and are we giving the message that we want to convey? I know, for one, I grew up with the concept of the Clean Plate Club, and a number of you may have, and for me this meant extra time at the table, usually at the end of the meal by myself, staring at some kind of scary vegetables. So it wasn't a real positive experience. So we hope that if we share some basics of a healthy feeding relationship, how those essential skills can help children learn to eat well and trust their own hunger and fullness cues. So Ellen Satter is an expert in childhood nutrition who's been around for a long time, and approximately 30 years ago she introduced the Division of Responsibility in Feeding. So it's a great place for parents to start. And how it works is the parent is responsible for the what is served, when and where, and the child is responsible for, from what is offered, how much they eat and whether they choose to eat. So this fundamental part of the parent's job is trusting the children to determine how much and whether to eat from what is provided. So when infants are born, they have this innate, ability to know when they're hungry and full. But as parents, do we sometimes later on start taking over that job for them? So how can parents do their job with feeding and children do their jobs with eating? So we're going to take a closer look at some strategies. So we're going to look at 6 overall strategies. And again, we have that resource list that's available in the overview and reading list on the extra handouts. And so you can get even more information from what we're going to present to you today. But let's take a look at these 6 strategies. So the 6 strategies to help kids eat healthy. The first one is developing a positive, picky-free parenting style. Second, developing and utilizing healthy mealtime routines. 3, getting kids in the kitchen to help at age-appropriate stages and activities. Number 4, including children in grocery adventures and taste explorations. And then number 5, enlisting non-parent positive influencers, because sometimes parents can say it and it doesn't mean the same as if other people that they are exposed to say it. And then number 6 is when to seek professional help. So during the rest of the webinar, we will discuss these in more detail. And again, that you have the resource list. One of the books that is good for basic picky eaters, not the extreme picky eaters, is the Picky Eater Project. It's kind of a 6-week talk families through some strategies. And with most of the book resources, it's recommended that you read the books from cover to cover and then develop your strategy. So we're going to give some basic tips today, but these types of resources have more help. And there's even books that help on our list for the more extreme picky eater. So let's take a look at strategy number 1. So positive, picky-free parenting. So the first part of that is developing a family mealtime mission statement as a compass. So maybe one family might decide that their overarching theme is that they're going to be a family of adventurous eaters. Or another family might decide, my children will grow up to be healthful eaters. Or another family might decide on something more like no more power struggles or mealtime battles. So you would have to kind of see in your family what would be your healthy mealtime mission statement. So then we can get into the adopting some family guidelines, and we have 10 rules for picky-free parenting. And these are listed on the handout as well if you want to go back through them, but we will go through each one. So the first one is quite important. It's being a good role model as a parent or caregiver. So your example is extremely powerful. So let kids see your openness to trying new flavors and tastes, eating balanced meals, sitting down at the table. Even if some of these things are challenging for yourself, it's important to role model them. And even if there's foods that you don't like, if they at least see you tasting and exploring and making an attempt, then they know that that is a worthwhile effort. So rule number 2 is the Ellen Satter division of responsibility in feeding. Parents decide what food's offered, when it's offered. So that's like the meal and snack times, spacing things appropriately. If you give a large snack an hour before dinner, you're not setting them up very well to make good choices at dinner time. So, and then where to eat. Are we eating at the dining room table, or if right now the dining room table is a staging area for things and we're eating in the den or the living room in front of the TV, do we need to maybe find a way to get back to the table or pull extra chairs up to the kitchen counter so we can all eat together without the screen? And then kids are going to decide what of what is offered to eat. Rule number 3, see the value in one bite. So that's that repeated exposure to work through that fear of new foods. It can take 10 to 15 times, and most children can come around to like new foods. Those extreme picky eaters may need some extra help with that, and Tok-Hui is going to help with that later in the program, because we know this one bite policy can be a little scary for some of those children. So rule number 4 is clean plates are not required. So we want children to pay attention to their hunger cues and their fullness cues. Some people find it helpful to evaluate hunger and fullness. A hunger scale like what's shown here could be helpful with older children, but even parents just having a conversation of, are you really full from that snack? If our family's not really in a hurry, maybe we'll delay dinner a little bit this particular day, and then next time we'll make a better choice on when we have our snack time. So helping us become more mindful eaters, and you know, because even preschoolers can start to figure out that when they go too long without eating, they get crabby, or then maybe then they get just really, really hungry or overstuffed if they ate too much. So rule number 5, no food rewards. So in our culture, we tend to use food rewards like going out to eat or having sweets or desserts. And those are only a short-term fix for encouraging children to eat their meal. And they do set the stage for emotional eating. So we really encourage you to take that out of the situation and think about having maybe just a certain number of days where you have a modestly pre-portioned dessert that is not tied with having to have eaten all their dinner or even any of their dinner. And other nights, maybe you just have a fruit as an offering. So it takes that dessert off the pedestal. So rule number 6, mealtime equals family time. So make it a fun time to connect together, shop, cook, eat together. The recommendation is at least 3 times a week, but more is better here. And especially with younger children, the more eating experience where they have role models with them is even better. And remember to avoid screens at the table for adults as well as kids. This is a great time to connect. So rule number 7, one family, one meal. So the parent's job is not to be a short order cook for the children. So if you're preparing special meals for picky eaters, that child is then deciding the what in the division of responsibility. So it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have something that the child would like. We do recommend that you have at least one safe or preferred food on the table that the child will eat. And if you have a very picky eater, you're just getting started, maybe you have 2 things, but don't short order cook. Rule number 8, learn together. So if you can do activities that are around food, whether it's planting a garden, shopping with your children, whether it's the farmer's market or exploring cultural foods, that can make interaction around food a positive thing. So we don't want meal times to be a stressful time. We want it to be a time of learning. So number 9 in positive picky-free parenting is have fun. So try not to take it too seriously. Enjoy your mealtime together. Some families will even, if mealtimes have been kind of a stressful time over encouraging eating, maybe they would have some conversation cards or things, traditions about what was a high point in your day today, so that you can keep the conversation on the positive. So rule number 10, be consistent but not rigid. So 10 rules is a lot, so we encourage you to think about, maybe pick a couple of these that you think your family would really work on and start on those, and then continue as you can. But even, an example of not being rigid is, let's say, you were at an appointment and dinner's going to be late. Maybe you do decide to have that snack an hour before the usual dinner time today, but maybe we're just going to have a little tiny snack, so we won't either fill up too full, or maybe we have that bigger snack and we delay dinner. So it's, consistent but not rigid. So another book that's in your resource list that can be fun, that is specifically by age and stage of the child, is Raising a Happy, Healthy Eater. So this is a fun resource to identify feeding problems, avoid picky eating, and expand your child's diet. It's a fun gift for new parents as well. So our second of the 6 larger strategies is developing healthy mealtime routines. So making a commitment to that certain number of family meals per week. We often think of dinners, but sometimes that might be a lunch or a brunch. So it could be, different times of day. And sometimes our families are busy and we might have to pre-prep some items to get that meal on the table faster. So I know I have a quick turnaround tonight. So I have cut up some of the vegetables that are going to go in the soup that I'm making this evening, so it will be a quick prep. So I did that while I was making my coffee this morning to take with me to work. Implementing some mealtime rules can be helpful. So that concept of no screens, no cell phones, no TV, no iPad. Everyone might sit at the table together for at least 20 minutes. It doesn't mean they have to eat, but we come together to have connection and conversation. And if they choose not to eat, that's their job. And we try to avoid complaining and nagging, so that gives both the kids and the parents something to work on. And avoid, unpleasant conversations. Maybe those can happen at another place or time, especially if we're dealing with the picky eater. And everyone playing a role that's age appropriate in preparing or cleaning up the meal. If we feel included in the process, not only does that decrease the stress for the parent in getting things on the table, but everyone feels involved and useful. So our third overall strategy of the 6 is kitchen routines. So by setting ourselves up, it can make some of these other things easier. So if you have a clogged pantry or refrigerator with some foods that aren't the best choices or aren't arranged very well, maybe take some time to clean those out. You might not do them both on the same day if you're busy, but you might take some time to do one weekend and one another weekend. Put the healthy foods, front and center where they're easy to see and reach, and the less healthy foods that you still think are appropriate to have on hand, more out of sight, so that they're not just going to be regular go-to foods, but they're there when you want them. And have fruits and vegetables that need to be cut up pre-prepped as much as possible, so they're easy to grab and go. I feel like I could have a bumper sticker that says, if we cut it, they will eat it, when it comes to like melon or other fruits that usually require a little preparation. So, because they can sit on the counter for forever and get bad, but if I cut it up and have it ready to go, it disappears. Having leftovers in clear containers so they get seen and get used up, so they can be used for snacks or lunches, are great ideas to help prevent food waste, as well as keep variety up for snacks. Another part of this is getting kids in the kitchen. So there's lots of different things by age that children can do. This is a list of some of them, But the main thing is to start training your little helper early. Even just hand washing and sink play can be a great place to start. But they can rinse a cucumber, they can oil a pan with a pastry brush, if those really early under age 3. Kids that are in that 3 to 5 range can measure things, and they can use a plastic knife to cut up bananas. If you're worried about the mess, sometimes you can put a sheet pan underneath the bowl, and it can catch that mess, and it's easier to clean up. A tea towel works as well. Older kids in that 5 to 7 year range can help cut up herbs with scissors, peel oranges and hard-boiled eggs. These might be a little bit messy at first, but you need to be okay with a little bit of mess, because how did we learn? Those kids that are in the 8 to 11 years old can help peel vegetables with an easy-use veggie peeler, help crack some raw eggs, and learn some basic knife skills with supervision that's appropriate. And then kids that are 12 years and older can do more cooking and chopping vegetables. Kids that age are great at cooking eggs. My son was better at cooking eggs than I was, because he was more focused and I was trying to do other things. If you're starting a child out later, maybe you're starting at the 9 years of age and they haven't had any of those other skills yet, you can include some of those earlier skills to help them feel more comfortable. So start with simple tasks and work up and provide the appropriate amount of supervision, but don't expect them to be perfect. So let's go to strategy number 4, grocery adventures. So how the food gets into the house can be an interesting part of understanding where our food comes from. If you haven't had a trip to the farmer's market with your children, that's a fun thing to do. Most of them are still going right now in October. But even if it's time of year where we don't have farmer's markets, even just a trip to the grocery store, or if you live where you occasionally can go to a fish market, that can be an extra fun outing. We encourage that you take a list with you, but maybe be a little bit flexible on what gets chosen based on what's seasonally available or what might seem interesting to your children. You might consider when you invite the kids. Maybe it's not when you're in a hurry or when everybody's really tired or people are too hungry. So make sure you go at a good time. And it's often a good idea to cruise the options first. So if you're going to go to the farmer's market, you might say, let's do a walk through and see what's available this weekend. And if they have some samples, we can taste and see who has the best apples this week. Talk to the vendors or the farmers. And maybe you ask kids to select either at the farmer's market or the grocery store a fruit or a vegetable this week, or maybe the shape of the pasta, or what color of canned beans should we buy this week for our chili. Get kids involved. At the farmer's market, there's even some special benefits for families that use the SNAP and WIC programs, and sometimes they get extra funds. So be sure and stop at the booth at your farmer's market to see if they have any special programs available. So next, I'm going to turn it over to Tok-Hui to help you with those picky eaters and taste exploration.
Thank you, Jendy. So continue on to the 4th principles will be food exploration. So we want to teach the kids how to politely taste, and if they can't swallow it, to quietly put it on a paper napkin, and give them plenty of permission to explore. So what we can do is we can start helping them by identifying their liked foods based on color, textures, or taste, and we usually start off with item that's very similar to their liked foods, and what we call it food chaining, which I'll explain a little bit more in detail later. We can pair new foods with the liked foods. You can do a combination of sour with bitter, with sweet or salty, or sour with sweet, bitter, and salty, vice versa. So we want to encourage, but don't force the tasting bite. Have a separate plate or a try bowl during family mealtime to let them explore the new food that they will be tasting. You can try the new food at family meal or as an appetizer. So for those that are very reluctant or very picky eater, have the tasting time at a non-meal time like after school will be less stressful. Give them credit for helping, smelling, or licking. All the kids liked their effort to be acknowledged. And talked about tucking exploration foods into soups and smoothies. So we don't recommend sneaking food into the things that they usually eat because we don't want them to associate a negative feeling with their liked foods. So talk about the new foods that you might wanted to add a little bit into the soup and smoothies that they have liked before. Have kids help grow an indoor or outdoor herb garden or a vegetable garden. That will help. So food chaining. So what is food chaining? It is a way to help children enjoy eating and expand their food choices. So the idea is simple. You start with the foods that your children liked and change that food's shape, color, or texture. So this technique is mostly used for children that is a little bit more pickier or very selective in their food selection. So usually it's less than 20 food items will fall into that category. So parents are usually advised to make a list of core foods of what their children like to eat. So make sure to count each of the food items separately, even though if the cooking technique and the flavor is different. So for example, cooked carrots, raw carrots, and roasted carrots will be counted as 3 core food items if they like all 3 of them. So once you have your core list, then you can start expanding the food selection slowly based on the same food, but different cooking technique or color, textures, and taste. So remember, this takes time and it won't happen overnight. So let's look at a few of those examples of how food chaining works. So example number 1 is texture. So we want to make sure that we introduce new textures as an infant at the correct developmental age. This is very important because very late or delayed introduction can lead to more challenges with textures acceptance as they grow up. So if they're only accepting fruit as a puree to start off with, so what you can do is you start off with the baby food banana or any other fruit puree. You add in the mashed banana or other mashed fruits, then slowly adjusting the ratio to add very small bits of the banana in, and then consequently you continue to adjust the ratio and give them a larger chunks of the banana, and eventually they'll learn to like the served banana slices, or they can even eat the banana as whole. So once you're at the whole banana stage, you can spread peanut butter, you can do cashew butter, sunflower seeds butter, or Nutella, and you can move forward with the different type of fruits on the texture component. And example number 2 will be chicken nuggets, one of the favorite go-to protein for most kids. And to move on to the next level, you move it on very slowly. You can try with different brand or just different shapes of the chicken nugget of the same brand. And then you move on to popcorn chicken or chicken strips. And if you can make those at home, that will be even better to get them more involved so that they can learn about the cooking technique and what they're actually eating. And then once you have the texture controlled, then you can add different dipping sauce. So you're adding a new component to what they are familiar with. You can do ketchup, honey mustard, barbecue, or a spicy dipping sauce. Once you're at that level, you can move on to Parmesan chicken with marinara sauce. So just continue to develop a more in-depth flavor profile of the things that they like to eat. So eventually you should be able to move on to grilled chicken, grilled turkey, or grilled fish. And the food chaining example, 3rd example, will be French fries. And you can transition them to tater tots, and then hash brown, roasted potato wedges, baked potatoes with toppings. And when you're at that baked potato with toppings level, you can have a little bit more fun with it. You can try to have the kids select what kind of toppings they wanted to put on it. You can make it into like a baked potato bar and have them have different type of toppings laid out on the table: shredded cheese, sour cream, bacon bits, chive, broccoli. and let the kids be in control of what kind of toppings they wanted to add on so that it doesn't overwhelm them too much. So at the end, we are hoping that they might like warm potato salad or cold potato salad, and eventually they will move on to more complex flavor profile with scalloped potatoes or sweet potatoes. And if you're interested, then you can look for the handouts for those recipes that we talked about, chicken parmesan with marinara sauce and a kid-friendly potato salad. And food pairing. So another technique that you can try is to pair the new food with the liked food. So pretzels with peanut butter, or pretzels with yogurt, or pretzel with different spreads that they can dip in. And then once you have those dipping sauce that they like, then you can switch to a different type of pretzels. They could be soft pretzels, it could be pretzel sticks, and it could be flat pretzels, and then continue to move on into different crackers, for example. And then sour and bitter with sweet or salty. The example will be grapefruit with small drizzles of honey, or broccoli with grated cheese. And then the fifth strategies will be enlisting non-parent positive influencers. So at school, at social groups, so schools with teachers, kids tend to listen to teachers better than their parents when they're at school. So, and then social groups, you can do birthday, food festivals, you can take them to farmers market, and let them be exposed to different type of foods that they might be able to do just a tasting bite. Grandparents, aunts, and uncles, they're the fun ones, so they're not as stressors, so they will be good in influencing your child as well. And then peers. So when they're at school or daycare, they tend to eat better when everyone is eating the same thing. So the six strategies will be when to seek professional help. So if you have tried all of those techniques that Jendy and I have talked about today and is not making progress, so maybe it's time to look for professional help. And here's some of the red flags that parents should watch out for. Failure to grow or gain weight, difficulty chewing or swallowing, food or liquids getting into lungs, pain with feeding, vomiting or diarrhea linked with eating, developmentally delays, some lungs and heart problems like cystic fibrosis or congenital heart disease, extremely selective, only a handful of food, forceful feeding by caregivers, a sudden rejection of food after choking or traumatic events, anticipatory gagging, refusal to eat or fear of fat, excessive weight loss or insistence on maintaining a very low weight, and vomiting or excessive exercise after eating. So if any of those reasons are a reason to seek for your child's pediatrician and determine a plan of action, because the pediatrician will be able to refer you and your child to an appropriate specialist to address those issues. So let's take a little survey as to which strategy that we've discussed today that you like to try. Choose a few picky free parenting tips to try. Clean out the kitchen and set it up strategically. Involve kids in food shopping and preparation. Enlist help from non-parent influencers, or seek professional help. So for myself, is to enlist the help from non-parent influencer. My daughter, I have a 3-year-old daughter at home, and she really loves Sesame Street. And one of the episodes when she saw, I was talking about healthy foods and superfoods, and they talk about kiwi. And the next day when we went to the grocery store, and she's like, "Almost say I gotta try kiwi." So we tried kiwi, and she liked it. So so this will be some of the things that you could look into as well. There's a lot of education series that would have video clips about healthy eating that can help with the children making better choices. And there's also books that talk about food as well.
Well, lots of great options here, Tok-Hui, and it explains why thus far we're having a split vote this time around. So we'll give it just a moment or two longer and go ahead and close this one out.
There's no right or wrong answer on this one. It's just we wanted to know what you're interested in trying after this webinar.
Absolutely, and we're at a solid 80% of the votes being registered, so we'll go ahead and close this poll. Thank you, everybody, for giving us your answer. And as you can see, we're evenly split between choose a few picky-free parenting tips and involve kids in food shopping and preparation. Both great suggestions.
Right. I'm glad that you would be able to find something that you can work on with your little picky eater at home. So we have also created a list of handout and resource for all the parents that's joining us today. So make sure to download it if you're on a live webinar. And if not, it will be archived in the Healthy You website later. And Jendy and I should have a few more minutes to answer some questions.
Yes, thank you, Tok-Hui. The questions have been coming in throughout the presentation, and we went ahead and held them until the end to ensure that you and Jendy had an ample opportunity to share all of this great information. So our first question, Tok-Hui, comes from Anne, and she asks, what should I do if I have already made meals stressful? How do you undo that?
That's a very good question. So first of all, you have to kind of backtrack. It's okay to already make the meal stressful. I think a lot of parents are guilty of that in the beginning. So kind of you have to adjust your own mentality and start making it fun again. So the kids is very forgiving. So even if the mealtime has been stressful before, but if they start noticing that you're making the subtle changes and making it fun again and not really pushing for them to eat, but just politely try and it's okay, and then ask them, why do you not like this food? Like trying to understand them a little bit better. Is there a particular reason why they don't like to eat the food that you're preparing for them?
Might it also be helpful, Tok-Hui, to have some of those influential others at the table, or maybe
right.
Bringing them into
bringing them in, taking them out of the home environment, so that they don't feel that it's always in a stressful situation when it comes to mealtime. Take them out to the restaurant and have friends or have play dates with other friends that will eat together and making it fun and more enjoyable again.
Wonderful. And then Joan asks, my teenager is...
For kids, I tend to work with my nephew and nieces, they're a little bit older, is that try to find out what they wanted to become. And if they like sports, so I have to tell them that if you eat healthy foods, it will help you perform better at sports. And if they like to perform better academically, then I have to tell them, you have to try fish. Fish has...
Great. Both great suggestions. So we have another question coming in, and the question is, sometimes grandparents make eating stressful. How do I educate them that the Clean Plate Club is not such a great idea?
Probably trying to talk to the grandparents in a private settings. Do not tell them in front of a kid. Have a private conversation to let them know that it's okay as long as the kids is growing well based on their developmental age. So just constant education. I understand how that goes through. I have parents-in-law that has their certain thinkings that the kids really need to eat everything. But I think it's more of an open dialogue. The more that you talk to them and the more that you give them the reason why you do what you do, they tend to be a little bit more open to the idea.
Yes, I've certainly found the same. Jendy, any thoughts about kind of disappointing the grandparents and helping our picky eaters?
Yeah, Tok-Hui's suggestion of having that conversation at a neutral time. So not at the time at the meal in front of the children, maybe even not at a time where it's just happened. But think about, we want to set the grandparents up to be successful. We don't want them to be defensive. So having a conversation with them at a different time and sharing with them your strategies, and that maybe you in the past have also made that mistake and are trying a different strategy. And some of them may be receptive to reading some material, so you could ask their permission would they like to have you share some basic resources from some tried and true things like some of the handouts that we have today, but get their permission if you're going to share written information, because you want them to want it. And they might not want it now, but later on they may ask for it.
Great. Thank you, Jendy. So we'll take just a couple more, starting with this question from Jennifer. Jennifer's issue is how the time that Jennifer's
will be appropriate a time for a kid to finish a meal. Jendy, what do you think?
And up to 30. Kind of depends on how much conversation is around the meal. And some meals at dinner we might take longer than we might at breakfast or lunch. I know at school they only get 20 minutes, so it's helping them, to realize that we might have a schedule, we might have some other things we might want to do, and we're not going to force you to eat, but you might find you might get hungry if you, and if they choose how much they're going to eat right now and they don't get it done, and it may take them a couple of weeks of, getting a little hungry and crabby because they didn't finish in the amount of time that the family had for the meal, that they'll figure out that they maybe need to pick up the pace a little bit to be reasonable. But yeah, 20 to 30 minutes is usually reasonable.
Great. And let's go with this question. Water with or before meals? So in other words, does water potentially fill you up, the child up, so that they won't be interested in the meal, or better to have it during the meal?
I would say had it with meal or after the meal. So if you already have a picky eater, you don't want them to fill up their stomach with too much fluid content. You want to make sure they eat the solids in the main meal first, and then they can quench their thirst later on.
Great. And so we'll wrap up with this final question. How do we balance eating with conversation without telling them to stop talking?
That is a very, very good questions. So if you have a chatty kid that likes to talk about their days and very excited about talking about the day at mealtime, just kind of limit the conversation to 1 to 2 minutes and let them finish talking, and then kind of re-guide them back to, oh, let's try this, let's eat it before it gets cold. We wanted to make sure the foods continue to taste good while it's still hot. Jendy, what do you think?
Go ahead, Jendy.
Another thought is, as well as that, is if you have one child that likes to monopolize the conversation, you can have a talking stick. Some people call it a talking stick, but it might be maybe it's a toy apple or something like that, and so that gets passed around, and each person at the table has opportunities to talk. So you want to help them learn, you know, conversational give and take, as well as giving themselves some time to listen and eat while somebody else is talking.
Well, I see using a talking stick in my household with my chatty 4-year-old Jendy. So wonderful suggestion.
Yeah.
So I think so that we can finish on time, we'll go ahead and wrap this question and answer session up now. However, for those who have additional questions, Jendy and Tok-Hui have both provided their email addresses here on our slide. So feel free to reach out to them, as they both have, just as you've heard, wonderful expertise. So if you've enjoyed today's webinar, we encourage you to sign up for our e-newsletter, our Healthy You e-newsletter, so that you'll be sure to get notices about other webinar offerings, such as today's, as well as news and other events that are great for your health. And we've thoroughly enjoyed spending this time with you today, and we hope you've enjoyed it too. A recording of today's webinar will be available soon on peacehealth.org/picky-eaters. And as you leave today's session, please take a moment to share your thoughts in our survey. It really helps us to keep our content fresh and make sure that it's relevant as well for you. So I want to thank you again for your interest and engagement in today's Picky Eater presentation. Hopefully you have lots of good food for thought to leave with today. And as we always end, the note that we always end on is, healthy is up to you, but remember that Peace Health is here to help. So thank you so much for your time and interest in our presentation.